Viknes is a really high quality Norwegian builder of compact offshore trawler yachts of between about 8 and 12 metres in length. And here at the Düsseldorf Boat Show, we're witnessing the world launch of a new 35-footer, the first in the next generation of that Viknes fleet, and it's this, the Viknes 10. Now, as you can see, if you look at the side of the boat with that reverse screen and that quite upright pilot house structure, it's got a slight aesthetic maybe of an offshore pilot house boat from the likes of Targa or Sargo or Nordstar. But here it's mixed with a lot more in the way of recreational polish and versatility, something more along the lines perhaps of a Marex, which of course is also Norwegian. But unlike the Marex, this particular boat, and in fact all of Viknes's yachts, are built near Bergen in Norway, even to this day, in spite of the temptation to minimise the wage bill by shifting production out to Eastern Europe. And I have to say, from start to finish, there's quality to enjoy on this boat, as well as plenty of ingenuity. And it all starts, as it often does, right here at the back end. Now, as you can see, that pilot house structure leads on to a really extended roof line. And we've got a soft sunroof in there that comes across that space. It's a huge aperture, and all of this comes as standard. And actually, because they're built in Norway, where the weather is often quite inclement, that's a double layered sunroof. So it's really quite snug, keeps the weather out, an absolute treat. And while we're talking about this boat's foul weather credentials, well, the canvas system is also really quite impressive. Now, on a lot of boats of this type, where you have runners running around the back end of that roof, you'll tend to stow your canvases in little cabinets at the back end of the superstructure and then just pull them out manually around the sides. Well, here we've got 3 individual canvases rolled up on these little retainers, and if you look closely you can see we've got 3 individual runners, so they're already rigged. You simply let them loose, unfurl them, slide them around the side, and then use these little tensioners to pull them taut. It's a really quick and easy system. And while I've been impressed by the likes of the Marex solution, I'd say that this particular canvas solution is the best I've yet seen. But before we get tempted to move forward and check out the accommodation and that covered saloon, let's just move back towards the transom, because there's plenty more clear thinking in evidence back here. Now, under this flap, though the show boat, this boat number 1, doesn't actually have it, there's apparently an automated tender retrieval system, which is operated from a button over there on the port side, which basically enables you to drive your tender to the transom and have it lifted straight out onto the bathing platform, onto that swim platform. Apparently it's good for tenders of up to 2.8 or 3 metres, and it's a really intuitive kind of system. If we move forward and look at these lockers, well, these work pretty hard too. We've got space for a couple of fenders in there, an additional locker there for your lines, which is drained, as you can see, so it keeps your lines nice and dry. Move over to the starboard side, more space for another fender there, plus your shore power with a little slot to keep the cable out of harm's way. Another line locker there, and an additional space beneath this swim platform for a nice big bulbous fender. And if I move round to the side here, you'll see that we also have on the starboard side deck one final fender locker there, so no problems with stowing your lines and your fenders. And just as the shore power's over on this starboard side, well, so is the transom shower, and so in fact is the swim ladder, which will come out from the starboard side. And that makes all kinds of sense, because as you can see, this is an asymmetrical cockpit layout, so your sole point of access is on this starboard side. So it makes a great deal of sense that all that equipment should be right here, easily to hand, but not in the way of that walkway as you make your way forward. We won't pop into the cockpit quite yet though, because as you can see, these cabinets, these storage lockers for your fenders and your lines, also operate as steps up onto the side decks. And as you can probably also tell, this is an asymmetrical deck layout. So we've got a narrower raised port side deck and a much deeper, more secure starboard side deck with a skipper's side door and an additional side gate, both of which come as standard. So let's make our way forward along that side deck towards the bow space and take a little look at what we've got up there. Now it's lovely and secure here. We've got enormous rooftop rails run the full length. And as you can see, just past the skipper's side door, we've got some really substantial steps that take that the level of the deck up on that bow way up. Promises really good volume down below. And if I pop the camera around the side, you'll see that that actually takes it a good distance above the rubbing strake. And you'll see there are some windows there, and there need to be, because there are no hull windows at all on this boat. They're all relatively high level. So I'm looking forward to getting down into that bow cabin and seeing what it's all about, particularly because we have such an alternative freehand kind of design up here on the foredeck. Now what you tend to expect is a raised island sunbed with removable cushions. But here, well, for a start, it's not especially raised, it's relatively low profile. And of course, because the foredeck is so raised, it doesn't need to be any higher than that. If I grab this little handle here and give that a pull, over comes that moulding, and on the back of that, we've got a couple of fishing style chairs that open straight out, kind of inset director's chairs. And they're made from kind of rubberized slats that are entirely weatherproof. Same with this backrest. So you can essentially leave that in its trough, recessed for the whole winter. There's no need to get rid of it and stow it in the house. It's entirely drained, so it stays nice and dry. And they're really very comfortable indeed. A very alternative way to arrange a foredeck. But this is a great spot with that little tray between you, just for you and your partner to come up front, sit in comfort, quite low level, just enjoy the view and enjoy a bit of privacy from the party further aft. Of course, if you're not that adventurous and you want a more conventional layout with cushions on here, that can be arranged too. But this is the standard setup and I like it a lot. And I also like this. You see, we've got texture machined into the fiberglass here, and that of course improves your grip as you're wandering around up here, and it also minimises glare if the sunlight's bouncing off here towards the skipper. So it works in a good couple of ways, that. And as for the forepeak itself, well, as you'd expect, it's a step through forepeak so that you can pop yourself ashore by the bow and use a stern anchor in the Nordic fashion. And on this particular model, we have the anchor mounted on the stem and a little bowsprit to aid with that. But if we lift up that hatch, you'll see that you can also grab that bowsprit, it's hinged, swing it back over and clean up the aesthetic of the boat if you prefer the way it looks like that. We also get a line locker, one on either side of that space, and if I spin around and head back down that narrower port side deck, you'll see that the roof structure works really hard as well. As we've already seen, we get that big canvas sunroof way aft above the cockpit. We've also got a rigid sunroof, a big one, huge aperture that, above the skipper and that port and net. That comes as standard, just as the aft one does, but there's still room for a solar array. So we've got a solar panel here, another two beneath the glass of that open sunroof, another two after that, delivering 580 watts. And as we head back down this side deck, well, in spite of the fact that it's relatively narrow, Viknes has done a fantastic job of making this feel secure. So we've got tow rails, we've got quite vertical peripheral rails, so you can jam your knee against that and really feel good and safe. And on the rooftop, well, we've got a steel rail that starts right up here at the bow and runs all the way to that aft quarter. It's absolutely massive, about 25 feet in length, I would say. And while on a lot of boats, you'll be making your way along this side deck and then the rail will disappear and you find yourself sort of reaching for the next. Well, this is one continuous piece, all done in-house, so it's very impressive indeed. We go down a step there and we see that, well, perhaps there are a couple of hazards here, but nothing major. We have the window here because that's watertight on the port side there. The mechanism forces it slightly outboard when it's open like that. So that slightly gets in the way. Not a lot though, it's not tough to move past. And we've got the nav light, which also pops out a little bit. Aside from that, nothing at all to get in your way. And as I say, despite its narrow proportions, it feels very secure. But now let's pop forward from here into this cockpit and take a little look at this. Because on the face of it, the layout at least feels relatively traditional, but actually there's so much clever stuff going on in here. It really is very satisfying indeed. So we get a big U-shaped dinette on the port side, a fridge built in under there, and here we have a natural oak table. That's a particular choice of the owner of this boat. They tend to go with natural teak instead. Because it's oak, they've used a kind of 3-ply design here just to give it some rigidity and to stop it warping when it gets damp. But that's a beautiful piece of work in its own right. And that table, of course, goes down into the space, so you can turn that into a sunbed. What I really like here are the simple things, like these hinges. Instead of this hinging from the back, so you have to remove the cushions or butt them up against each other, the hinges are at the front, so it's a one-handed operation, simply to lift that cushion up. And look at that. Lots of easy access storage, even when you're holding a GoPro. It's the same on the side here, as you can see. The hinges inboard, so you could just hinge these cushions directly up and get instant access. There's a gas locker, because we have a gas stove on board this boat. And if I open this locker slightly further aft, well, that's another really good space. All of these spaces really well lined, very usable. But I do wonder why every boat builder in the world, even one as clear thinking as Viknes, insists on putting the reservoir for the screen wash as far away from the actual screen as they can. Very peculiar, but everybody seems to do it. Now, if I turn myself around, you'll see that on the starboard side, they've used the internal volume inside those bulwarks pretty effectively as well. If I open this up, we've got a set of hooks that are used for keys at the moment, but they'd be great for your life jackets. And you can also opt for a little outlet for your diesel heating, which means that you can dry them off while they're in that cabinet. Also got another little outlet for your diesel heating here, so that when you've got your canvases erected, you can keep this lovely and warm. And it makes good sense, because when you see the aperture of this gap that integrates the inside and outside spaces, courtesy of these 3-part sliding doors and this lifting and dropping panel on the starboard side, well, you can imagine how when you've got this cordoned off and these bits opened up, it feels like one continuous cylinder of day boating space. Very generous indeed. To think this is only a 35-footer, it's quite a thing. But what you will also have noticed is this, a second helm, and this also comes as standard. It's a really high-spec package, even in standard configuration. It's not your average second helm either. We get a proper wheel and your thrusters there. We've got proportional thrusters on this boat, which are an option, plus your throttles, of course. All within good reach of the aft end of the boat and the tying off points and that side gate. So it's super practical. And if you like a bit of summer boating, it also means that you can stand back here to do your helming and stay an integrated part of this party. So it's really good from a socializing point of view too. As we move forward into the saloon, the shape of the furniture in here broadly mimics what we see in that aft cockpit. We've got a lovely raised dinette on that port side. Now, it's a relatively short space given the length of the boat, because you've got a big cockpit and a decent foredeck. But as you can see, they've used the space pretty effectively. I can't lift that on my own. Yes, I can. There we are. So if you swing over that forward backrest, the seat elevates, brings it to the same level as the skipper. So you get excellent all-round visibility. And I'll actually perch on there, because in spite of the fact that that forward screen, that reverse screen, is relatively narrow, all-round visibility here is excellent, I have to say. Just as we got that textured finish on that foredeck as well to minimise glare, where we've got an anti-glare kind of matte fabric used in the construction of this co-pilot section as well, and of course at the dash itself. But if we pop this back for a second, you'll see that we've got more clever work in evidence. Now, this is standard. On a lot of tables in the saloon dinette, you tend to have a telescopic strut, so you could drop it into the space, turn it into an additional berth. But believe it or not, this particular boat has 3 cabins as it is, so they deem that unnecessary. You can have that telescopic strut if you want, so you can turn this into an additional double berth for occasional guests. But I really like this. The base for this table, which incidentally is more oak, the same as in that aft cockpit, but this time with a kind of pale chalky lacquer. If we come under here, open this up, they've used the upright for this table to really good effect. Space for a couple of bottles of wine down in there, plus your glasses. all in their dedicated spots, and your teacups. And the quality, as I've intimated, is absolutely lovely. Really like that feature. And if we spin around to face the starboard side, well, on the face of it, that galley doesn't look huge, but again, it works the space really hard. So what we have here is a gas hob. I appreciate it looks electric, but this is actually gas under glass, so you get all the benefits of gas and none of the hazards. We also have a pair of sinks here. We've got a nice big fridge down below, a gas oven beneath the skipper seat further forward, and slightly limited work surface, you would say, but you can of course just fold the skipper's chair forward, and that makes loads of sense because it also reveals this TV, enables you to view it from that port side. But of course, if you don't want that up, you can pop that away. That's not a problem at all. And if you look at this storage and think, well, it's not that generous, well, actually, again, it's beautifully arranged. Just as beneath that table, there's a space for everything. There's a little flip-out bin down at the bottom there. And if we look beneath the deck, well, this is even more pleasing. A huge space beneath the deck for storage with integrated steps so you can climb down inside there. And while on most boats, even really high-end premium boats, you tend to see storage spaces that are just big cavities beneath the deck and you chuck your gear down there and good luck to you. Well, here, everything is properly compartmentalised with trays and shelves and little cubby holes. It's superbly well done. And if we come back out of there and just close up that hatch so nobody disappears down the hole, head back out into the cockpit, you'll see that they've worked the engine space pretty hard as well. There's our Yanmar 370 hooked up to a straight shaft, and we've got a purpose-built partition just after that with an integrated step, so you can pop down into that space and properly organise your baggage. Really nicely done that, and so actually is the insulation, really high quality. Nice rubber gaskets lining the edges here. So they say that even at decent speeds, cruising speeds around about 23 knots, you're only looking at about 72 decibels from the helm, which is very user-friendly for an extended cruise. There is also access to the engine on the port side there if you remove this seat pod for proper servicing or more major jobs. If you move back inside and lift this seat at the back end of the dinette, you start to see how the cabins are laid out. Now we've got 3 steps taking you down in here. As I say, no hull windows, so no natural light in here, but there is an option for a window just out into the saloon there, just to give you a sense of space and a better view. That's on the options list. A hull window is not, but they tell me that if you absolutely insist on it, then something can probably be done. But what we have in here is a really good size of single bed, 2 meters in length. An unexpected cabin with some good storage facilities as well. And if I just rotate myself and jam myself over here into this space, well, as you can see, headroom, even if I'm sitting upright, is really good. So it's a very comfy spot for an adult or a couple of kids just to stow themselves away aft. And they tell me that if this boat finds its way into the charter industry, well, it's a handy spot to stick a skipper so that you can keep yourself private with those 2 cabins further forward. We're going to take a look at those now. Just down the companionway to port of the helm, and there's the bow cabin. To the port side is the heads compartment and shower, and to the starboard side is the second guest cabin, this time a double. We'll pop in there first. As you can see, plenty more in the way of storage. There's a little window there, and this is quite interesting actually, because if I just move the camera over and poke it out, you'll see that we've got a little overhang here so that you can have the window open, you can have ventilation even if it's raining and you won't get yourself wet. There's also a changing seat down in here, and the bed itself runs transverse beneath that saloon. And headroom is really very good indeed. Again, I'll sit myself in the space at the head end here and show you how much we're playing with. It's perfectly acceptable, that. Once again, no hull windows, of course. But as I say, if you insist upon it, they're sure they can do something to sort you out. This bed is 2 meters, exactly like that single bed further aft. And if we head across into the heads compartment, well, that's equally well proportioned. All over this boat you just see little elements of texture where naked fiberglass could have been very easy. It makes it fairly stylish, and it also does minimise glare of treat. It's very nicely fitted out. And we get the same kind of oak finish in here, a kind of bleached oak finish. Very classy, very Nordic. It's kind of what you want and expect from a quality Norwegian brand like Viknes. As for the shower compartment, well, it is separate, even though it appears to inhabit the same space. So I have a go at operating this one-handed. That comes out to the door, and this section fits in there, so that you cordon yourself off from the sink, from the toilet, from your towel, from your bits and bobs, so not everything gets wet. Again, a decent window there for ventilation, and of course a roof vent as well. It is the only heads compartment on the boat, but this is a 35-footer with 3 cabins, so you'll absolutely take that. Now let's take a look at that owner's cabin in the bow. As you can see, we've got a sliding door here just to maximise the use of space. It means you don't have to push the bed further forward to create an arc for your door. And that means that the bed itself is pretty generous, and it's very substantially raised too. Lots of deep storage underneath that. Multiple cabinets. We've also got storage lining either side. It's entirely symmetrical. It's a very attractive space. You do get a little ledge just down here, right at the forepeak, that kind of digs you in the back of the head a little as you're trying to prop yourself up. So propping yourself up with a mountain of pillows makes it all just that little bit better. And because you've got such length, 2 meters, like every other bed on this boat, you can absolutely do that. As for the performance of this boat, well, it is a semi-displacement platform, so speed, outright speed, is not the priority, but it is pretty brisk. Even with this optional engine that we saw back after, the 370, it should be good for around about 25 knots. And with the standard fit out, which involves the Yanmar 6LY 440, you should expect around about 28 knots. And the helm station is pretty well kitted out too. There's loads of fore and aft travel there, even for a big man to get himself comfortable. And the seat itself, which is apparently built by Helly Hansen, is an absolutely beautiful thing. If I move the camera just down in here, you might be able to see the curve of the lumbar. It's really stylish, really supportive. I'd actually say it's about as good a helm seat as I've ever sat in. It's that comfortable, and as I say, fully adjustable. And as you'd expect, the helm station is pretty high spec. Relatively compact, but they used additional mouldings elsewhere in the kind of pilot house style. We've got the stereo remote up top there and a speaker. We've got the VHF on the side next to that additional vent for the diesel heating. And in terms of the dash layout itself, well, we've got plenty of switchgear there, manual switchgear. We've got a 16-inch plotter as standard. We also get autopilot and a depth sounder as standard, plus we've got these proportional thrusters we mentioned earlier. They are an extra. The entire dash unit is built from the same low glare material we saw over at the port side for the co-pilot. And of course we've got that skipper's side door, direct access to that broader, deeper side deck on the starboard side, plus direct access to that cleat as well and tying off points. So it really is a very practical helm station, even if you decide to helm this boat single-handed. So there we have it. That is the new Viknes 10. And as I say, it kind of mixes the offshore posturing of a boat like the Targa with the kind of recreational sophistication we expect from the likes of Marix. It uses the space supremely well. The quality is excellent, and the spec of the standard package is quite extraordinary. But in all honesty, even the price is not that offensive. If we spin the camera around and just take a look at this, you'll see that the standard, the basic package, goes from 310,000 euros excluding VAT. But even in super high spec showboat form, we're looking at 445,000 euros, including VAT. And I think that's pretty stupendous value for money for a boat of this caliber, built in Norway, that does as much as this. For my money, potentially even the most exciting boat I've seen here over 4 days at the Dusseldorf Boat Show. Now, whether you agree with that or not, please do comment in the section below. We'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you want more videos along these lines, please do subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.